Today, two of Iran's top nuclear scientists were targeted by hit squads.
Separate bomb attacks in the capital, Tehran.
In a string of attacks.
Iran immediately accused the U.S. and Israel of trying to damage its nuclear program.
I want to categorically deny any United States involvement in any kind of act.
Iran's infrastructure is being targeted by a new and dangerously powerful cyber worm. The so-called Stuxnet worm is specifically designed, it seems, to infiltrate and sabotage real-world power plants and factories and refineries.
No one knows who's behind the worm and the exact nature of its mission, but there are fears Iran will hold Israel or America responsible.
It's not impossible that some group of hackers did it, but the security experts that are studying this really think this required the resources of a nation state.
Natanz is just in the middle of the desert. When they were building it in secrecy, they were calling it a desert irrigation facility. There is a lot of artillery and air force. It's better protected against attack from air than any other nuclear installation I have seen. So this is deeply underground. A centrifuge. You feed uranium in and you have a cascade, thousands of centrifuges, and from the other end you get enriched uranium out. It separates uranium based on spinning, the rotors. It spins so fast, 300 meters per second, the same as the velocity of sound. These are tremendous forces, and as a result, the rotor, it twists, looks like a banana at one point of time. So it has to be in balance, because any small vibration, it will blow up.
So a centrifuge, it's driven by an electrical motor. And the speed of this electrical motor is controlled by another PLC, by another programmable logic controller.
Centrifuges spin at incredible speeds, about 1,000 hertz.
They have a safe operating speed, 63,000 revolutions per minute.
Stuxnet caused the uranium enrichment centrifuges to spin up to 1,400 hertz.
Up to 80,000 revolutions per minute.
What would happen was those centrifuges would go through what's called a resonance frequency. It would go through a frequency at which the metal would basically vibrate uncontrollably and essentially shatter. And then the second attack they attempted was they actually tried to lower it to 2 hertz.
They were slowed down to almost standstill.
And at 2 hertz, sort of an opposite effect occurs. You can imagine a kid's top, a toy top that you spin, and as the top begins to slow down, it begins to wobble at the very end. That's what would happen to these centrifuges. They would begin to wobble and essentially shatter and fall apart.
Here is a piece of software that should only exist in the cyber realm, and it is able to affect physical equipment in a plant or factory and cause physical damage.
Real-world physical destruction. At that time, things became very scary to us. Here you had malware potentially killing people. But it wasn't lost on us that probably only a few countries in the world that would want and have the motivation to sabotage Iranian's nuclear enrichment facility. So at Symantec, we have probes.
We've actually seen infections of Stuxnet all over the world.
It spread to any Windows machine in the entire world.
In France, Germany,
we had these organizations. We were inside the United States. We were in charge of industrial control facilities, saying we're infected. What's going to happen?
Could have very dire consequences. There was a deadline coming up where this threat would trigger, and suddenly it would turn off
Secretary,
all,
the White House,
stop shutting this down,
wake up the world and figure out what's going on.
We're going to create something new, something evolved. That's going to be far, far, far more aggressive. Stuxnet wasn't just an evolution. It was really a revolution in the threat landscape. We realized that we needed to do what we call deep analysis. Pick apart the threat, every single byte, every single 0 and 1, and understand everything that was inside of it. When looking at the Stuxnet code, it's 20 times the size of the average piece of code, but contains almost no bugs inside of it. And that's extremely rare. Malicious code always has bugs inside of it. This wasn't the case with Stuxnet. It's dense, and every piece of code does something and does something right in order to conduct its attack. One of the things that surprised us was that Stuxnet utilized what's called a zero-day exploit.
Zero-day exploit is an exploit that nobody knows about except the attacker. So there's no protection against it. There's been no patch released. There's been 0 days protection, against it. That's what attackers value, because they know 100% if they have this 0-day type of exploit, they can get in wherever they want.
We became more worried because immediately we discovered more 0 days. And again, these 0 days are extremely rare.
The next very big surprise came when we infected our lab system. We figured out that the malware was probing the controllers. It was quite picky on its target. It didn't try to manipulate any given controller in a network that it would see. It went through several checks, and when those checks failed, it would not implement the attack. It was obviously probing for a specific target.
It was doing something with Siemens software, possibly Siemens hardware.
Stuxnet was targeting a very specific hardware device, something called a PLC, or a programmable logic controller.
The PLC is kind of a very small computer attached to physical equipment like pumps, like valves, like motors.
What it was doing was replacing the code that's normally on that programmable logic controller with its own code. Those programmable logic controllers control things like power plants, power grids.
This is used in factories, it's used in critical infrastructure.
So the payload of Stuxnet was designed to attack some very important part of our world.
Moving forward in my analysis of the code, it was absolutely clear that this piece of code was attacking an array with 6 different groups of, let's just say, thingies, physical objects, and in those 6 groups there were 164 elements. We then were able to establish a very good match between the attack code and the configuration of the Natanz fuel enrichment plant. There were these 6 groups of centrifuges, and each group had 164 entries. And guess what? That was a perfect match to what we saw in the attack code.
They built in all the code and all the logic into the threat to be able to operate all by itself. It had the ability to spread by itself. It had the ability to figure out, do I have the right PLCs? Have I arrived in the cans? Am I at the target?
And when it's on target, it executes autonomously. That also means you cannot call off the attack.
Was the U.S. involved in any way in the development of the
cyber attacks on the Iranian nuclear program that you ordered?
Stuxnet virus.
Well, first of all, I'm not going to comment on the details
I can't
of
talk about Stuxnet. I
what
can't
are supposed
even
to
talk
be
about the operation of
classified
Iran centrifuge.
items. Since I've been in office, my attitude has been zero tolerance for these kinds of leaks.
And this is
we have mechanisms in place where if we can root out folks who have leaked, they will suffer consequences.
It's a covert operation. Maybe you don't know as much as you think you know. Look, this is not a Snowden kind of thing. I think what he did was wrong. He went too far. He gave away too much. Unlike Snowden, who was a contractor, I was in NSA. I believe in the agency, so what I'm willing to give you will be limited, but we're talking because everyone's getting this story wrong, and we have to get it right. We have to understand these new weapons. The stakes are too high. We did Stuxnet. It's a fact. You know, we came so fucking close to disaster, and we're still on the edge. It was a huge, multinational, interagency operation. In the US, it was CIA, NSA in the military, Cyber Command. From Britain, we used Iran intel out of GCHQ, but the main partner was Israel. Over there, Mossad ran the show, and the technical work was done by Unit 8200. Israel is really the key to the story. The Natanz attack, and this is out there already, is called Olympic Games, or OG. We tried out different attack vectors. We ended up focusing on ways to destroy the rotor tubes. In the tests we ran, we blew them apart. And the first time we introduced the code into Natanz, we used human assets. Maybe CIA, more likely Mossad. Our team was kept in the dark about the tradecraft. What we had to focus on was to write the code so that once inside, the worm acted on its own. But the cyber delivery systems were tricky. If they weren't aggressive enough, they wouldn't get in. If they were too aggressive, they could spread and be discovered. But what NSA did was always low-key and subtle. The problem was that Unit 8200, the Israelis, kept pushing us to be more aggressive. Instead of hiding, the code started shutting down computers, so naturally people noticed. And it spread all over the world.
Iran's nuclear ambitions must be stopped. They have to be stopped. We all have to stop
States like these
now. That's
and their
the
terrorist
one
allies
message I have for you today. Thank you.
axis of evil.
کار بدی کردن، بداخلاقی کردن، اما خوشبختانه متخصصین ما رو کشف کردن و امروز دیگه قادر نیستن.
The most extensive attack on American banks ever, launched from the Middle East, happening right now.
Iran is the first country ever in the Middle East to actually be engaged in a cyber war with the United States and Israel.
There are unintended consequences of the Stuxnet attack. You wanted to cause confusion and damage to the other side, but then the other side can do the same to you.
In international law, when some country or a coalition of countries target a nuclear facility, it's an act of war. If you are a youth and you see assassination of a nuclear scientist, your nuclear facilities are getting attacked, wouldn't you join your national cyber army? Well, many did. And that's why today Iran has one of the largest cyber armies in the world.
The monster turned against its creator, and now everyone is in this game.
Very quickly, Iran sent a message to the United States. Very sophisticated message. And they did that with two attacks. First, they attacked Saudi Aramco, the biggest oil company in the world, and wiped out every piece of software, every line of code on 30,000 computer devices. Then Iran did a surge attack on the American banks. People sat around in the White House Situation Room and said, the Iranians have sent us a message, which is essentially, stop attacking us in cyberspace the way you did at Natanz with Stuxnet. We can do it too.
Iran's number of centrifuges went up exponentially to 20,000 with a stockpile of about 10,000 tons of low-enriched uranium. These are high numbers. Iran's nuclear facilities expanded with the construction of Fordo and other highly protected facilities.
President Obama said to the senior leadership, "You told me it wouldn't get out of the network. It did. You told me the Iranians would never figure out it was the United States. They did. You told me it would have a huge effect on their nuclear program, and it didn't."
So ironically, cyber warfare, assassination of its nuclear scientists, economic sanctions, political isolation. Iran has gone through A to X of every coercive policy that the US, Israel, and those who ally with them have placed on Iran. And they have actually made Iran's nuclear program more advanced today than it was ever before. So whoever initiated this and was very proud of themselves to see that little dip in Iran's centrifuge numbers should look back now and acknowledge that it was a major mistake.
To this day, the United States government has never acknowledged conducting any offensive cyber attack anywhere in the world.
We count on computer networks to deliver our oil and gas, our power, and our water.
Critical infrastructure.
We rely on them for public transportation and air traffic control. But just as we failed in the past to invest in our physical infrastructure,
this actually
we failed to invest in the security of our digital.
I understand the difference in destruction is dramatic, but this has the whip of August 1945. Somebody just used a new weapon, and this weapon will not be put back into the box.
In the 19th century, there were only army and navy.